Thanks. Hi, Denise. I'm a director at Paragon Architects, so I'm more on the architecture side than on the interiors, although these days we often kind of combine them into one project. It's happening more and more. And I head up various projects, schools, hotels, offices, industrial, the whole works.
Your press release that you sent through just some very interesting angles on the whole change of office space and what the transformation is that COVID has kind of been the catalyst for. Can you tell us a little bit more about what do you find most exciting about the space planning paradigm shift that's happened as a result of COVID?
It's not just space planning, it's the built environment in general. I think it's really exciting that this pandemic has forced us to focus back on what's important, that the built environment is for people, and that we've got to create spaces that are healthy for people and for their well-being. You would think it's obvious, but we have found that sometimes things tend to drift away from there. And I think it's great that we're just bringing things back to basics.
In terms of trends that have happened, over the last while, what are some of the local and global trends in terms of the built environment that have taken place post-COVID, and how receptive is the market to adopting these trends?
The market is very receptive because they're being forced to be. I think employers are saying to or employees are saying to their employers, what are you doing to make me safe? How are you enticing me back to the office? I'm very comfortable at home. A lot of people are saying that. So I think people are really, and companies are really open. They're going, what can I do? How do I change? So just getting back to what I just said about, I think the first step is just looking at what creates a healthy environment for people. So the basics like enough ventilation, enough fresh air, natural light, creating social spaces because that's part of our well-being. Designing spaces with surfaces that are possibly antimicrobial, also surfaces that don't give off unhealthy gases, that kind of thing. Just overall, again, going back to what's healthy. Then I think there's the next thing that's obvious is just we have to design more space for people. People need more space to sit, to work, to move around without being crowded against other people. So whether that means just spacing desks further apart or actually making desks bigger, that we'll have to see. But I think the trend in the last 10 years has certainly been that everything's become smaller and smaller, and the square meterage per person has become very small. And I actually think something had to give, and it's a good thing that we're creating a bit more space now for people, also with things like stairs, giving more space, stairs for people to use so that they don't have to crowd into a lift, that kind of thing. And then technology that limits touching of shared surfaces. So bringing a lot of technology that we've had for a long time, but things like sensor lights, automatic doors, lifts and AV that work with your cell phone, things like that. That's coming in a lot stronger now. And then I think we're going to see a lot more smaller conference rooms. The days of those huge conference rooms with 25 people in a room, I think you will have that, but not often. You'll now see 2 or 3 people in a conference room, and they will probably have other people dialing in remotely. And so we need to look at the conference rooms that they soundproof and that they work well with AV. Also, spaces for single people to sit when they're having a remote call. And we're finding in our own office at the moment, it's a bit of a challenge. It bothers other people if you're in a call where you're constantly talking and you're sitting next to an employee. So that kind of spaces we need to look at. And then, of course, collaboration spaces. I think what's also exciting is that we're going back to why do we come to the office? We're not really coming to the office to just sit and work. We can do that from anywhere, but we come to collaborate, to build company culture, to communicate, and creating more spaces that foster that. And then lastly, something that's close to my heart is creating more covered patio and outside landscape spaces. I think it's such an easy thing to do, to create a meeting room, for example, outside that's got beautiful natural ventilation. People get in contact with planting that's really good for their health. And I think we're going to see a lot more of that in buildings. I think historically here in South Africa, landlords haven't been able to charge the same rent for these external spaces than they've been charging for internal office spaces. And I think that's sometimes where some of the resistance have come from. And even tenants saying, maybe my floor plate isn't that efficient if I've got, this big balcony. But I think people have come to realize that it's actually quite an important element of health to be able to see planted spaces and to be able to be in it.
You touched on the the people are comfortable working from home, but how, in your opinion, does remote working hamper effective collaboration and that retention or development of company culture?
I think that's probably the biggest problem with remote working. I think even collaboration, technology has allowed us to collaborate very well, but if you're not building that personal relationship with the person that you're collaborating with, it becomes a little shallow. So that for me goes with company culture. It's that glue that sits in between your work. It's that asking John how his dog is when you're going for a cup of coffee. It's the serendipitous interactions that happen between people in an office space. I think that we really miss. We all dial in remotely for a meeting and it's business. You're not chit-chatting. You're talking about what you need to talk, and then you dial off. You don't have people where previously people would arrive 5 minutes early and they would have a quick chat. So I think that's one of our biggest stumbling blocks with the remote working. And that's why I think there'll always be a space. It's not like the office is going to disappear. There'll always be that part of it that you can only really work on when you're in the office. So the question is just how to do that safely, and how to give people the freedom to work remotely or in the office, but still enough time to build that culture.
How are traditional office spaces currently geared to work in terms of their space planning and for this new way of doing things? And would retrofitting or adapting those existing spaces be a viable solution?
Yes, for sure. I think a lot of the spaces, the main issue is just that the densities have been way too high and people have to be spread out more. But I think because people are working remotely parts of the week, a lot of people are, it's easier to spread them out. So it's about looking at your furniture layouts, looking at your passages, possibly adding things like stairs. I think new builds will see, my guess is, a lot more natural ventilation and things like that coming through, but you can work with the spaces that are there in most cases and just kind of reimagine it and redesign it. And a lot of it is just about furniture and space planning.
Can you elaborate a little bit on how offices of the future would need to be different, and what is Paragon exploring in terms of their new designs or on new projects?
I think I already touched on a lot of that when I spoke about the new trends. I can maybe just elaborate on what I mentioned is close to my heart, the idea of giving people more access to spaces that are landscaped and covered. I think we've had this emphasis for a while on collaboration, but we're thinking about it in a new way now. For example, we've been looking at a refurbishment in Cape Town for an office building, and it has a courtyard, an open courtyard in the middle that's never been used. It's just a sterile space. And we said, this is the ideal place to create that social collaboration space in a safe, outside ventilated space with planting. And we designed an entire coffee bar outside with seating, with planting. And I think that's some of the things that we're working on that's coming through now. Let's bring the whole building together. It's not just even about your firm. You can meet other people as well, but it is in that open space and in that open environment that's a lot safer in terms of pathogens floating around.
This is the Steel Construction Journal, so I have to ask a steel-related question. I'm sure my colleagues will have more. How do you anticipate the strength, flexibility, and architectural appeal of steel as a material facilitating these new approaches or these new designs?
I think a lot of the changes are going to happen in existing buildings, and that's where steel is very easy because you can pre-manufacture, you can pre-weld, you can literally come and bolt things into place. So it's not as dusty and as noisy as wet construction. So that's where we often tend to lean to when we're doing refurbishments. Even if you have to install a new stair or whatever it is, it's a lot easier and simpler with steel. Because of that pre-manufacturing component, and also because it's light and it's thin, and it doesn't take up a whole lot of space on your floor.